I am broken. I have struggled to raise him. I worked in a quarry for 20 years just so he could get a university degree. He was my hope, my future. And now he's gone. Those aren't my words. They are the words of Meshach Opio, the grieving father of Albert Ojwang, a young father himself, a newly married man, and a high school teacher with dreams of building something bigger than poverty. They came to our home. They saw how we lived, a poor compound, a struggling family. They saw the food my wife had cooked, simple, not from any high-end hotel. They didn't care. They didn't let him eat. They didn't let him say goodbye to his wife, to us. They just bundled him into a car. That was the last time we saw our son alive. Albert didn't die in an accident. He didn't die in war. He died in silence, in the hands of people who were supposed to protect us. This is not just a tragedy. It is a question of justice. So, what happened? How did a promising teacher with no criminal record, a man with a family, end up dead?
The preliminary findings
The Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, is doing its own investigation. But what we have so far aligns with what they'll likely uncover. And according to multiple interdicted officers, this story didn't start with Albert. It started with someone bigger. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. On Monday, May 19, 2025, Gachagua resurfaced in public after allegedly going into hiding the previous day. Sunday, May 18th, when word spread that police were looking for him. At a tense press conference, he accused the government of deploying a killer squad, allegedly led by Deputy Inspector General of Police Eliud Langat, tasked with assassinating him using chemical weapons.
The use of biological weapons. The instructions were to poison me through inhaled chemicals and paralyze my brain within 3 minutes.
That allegation lit a fire.
I, Rigathi Gachagua.
Gachagua wasn't just any politician. He had held the second most powerful seat in the Republic of Kenya. And according to reliable sources, Gachagua vowed to bring Langat down. Within days, headlines exploded. One of them, published by the Star newspaper, read, "A senior police officer is being investigated after purchasing a $2.5 million property in Dubai, in cash. Sources say the officer collects over 100 million in bribes every month, with a well-connected syndicate spanning the National Police Service." That newspaper front page, with Langat's image printed bold, shook him to his core. He believed Gachagua was behind it, and so he struck back. Langat instructed a deep investigation into the leak. He believed the newspaper stories were planted. But the more he investigated, the more headlines began to appear. Then came June 2nd, 2025. This time, it wasn't the Star, it was the Standard newspaper, and the headlines were even more damning. The Mafia Cop. A report alleging Langat heads a well-organized police syndicate involving 12 Nairobi police base commanders funneling over 100 million monthly into his pockets. The Richest Cop, exposing Langat's suspicious wealth and influence. Langat's rage reached a boiling point. He sent 3 GSU officers to raid the Standard Media Group headquarters. They drove in a vehicle with the number plate KDD 055Z, a number later revealed to be fake, registered to a completely different car. But the Standard denied ever publishing those headlines. The officers returned empty-handed. Now the hunt began, not for the media, but for whoever created these fake front pages. This is when Albert's name entered the radar. And from here, the investigation shifted, from headlines to interrogations, and ultimately to a forest of horror. After the police realized the 2 newspaper headlines were fake, they began tracing the person or group behind their creation. Langat strongly believed that former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua had sponsored the fabrication of these headlines. The search led them to a digital device located in Kisii. Without wasting time, the dig deployed 3 officers from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, who travelled to Kisii. There, they discovered the device used to create the fake headlines belonged to one Kevin Moinde. Kevin Moinde, when confronted, panicked and confessed to the officers that he had been hired to design those fake headlines. He added that the story had also been published online under the account Pixel Pioneer. But Moinde didn't stop there. He went ahead and gave up the name Albert Omondi Ojwang. The DCI officers then travelled all the way from Kisii to Kasipul constituency in Homa Bay County, where they arrested Albert Omondi Ojwang just as he was about to have lunch with his wife. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear. The arrest of Albert Ojwang was not because of a social media post, as many have been led to believe. No, it was because of the fake headlines Albert and his team allegedly created, headlines that tarnished the image of Deputy Inspector General Eliud Langat. The DIG believed Gachagua had funded this team. Albert was transported from Homa Bay to Nairobi Central Police Station. Now listen carefully. According to one of the interdicted officers at Nairobi Central, the DCI wanted only one thing from Albert: cooperation. He was to 1. Reveal who hired them. Because Dig Langat was convinced that former DP Rigathi Gachagua was behind it all. 2. Disclose the identities of other members of their group who helped create and spread the fake headlines. You see, Kevin Moinde had already admitted they were hired, but claimed only Albert Ojwang knew who was truly behind the plan. Ladies and gentlemen, when you go into something risky with someone, make sure they're strong. Don't walk with cowards like Kevin Moinde. If only he had kept quiet, maybe we wouldn't be here today mourning Albert's death and demanding justice. But because of his cowardice, he gave him in. According to that same interdicted officer, Albert arrived at Nairobi Central Police Station at exactly 9:35 p.m. on the 7th of June 2025. He was allowed to make 2 phone calls, one to his wife and another to a friend. That call to his wife would be the last time she ever heard his voice. Once booked, Albert was handed over to a police constable named James Mokwana, who placed him inside a holding cell. The vehicle that brought him from Homa Bay was dismissed. A few minutes later, another private car pulled into the station yard. Constable Mokwana walked into the cell, removed Albert, and handed him over to the unknown occupants of the private car, who never stepped out of the vehicle. The vehicle drove along University Way headed towards Westlands. Less than 2 minutes later, a group of fellow activists arrived at the station asking to see Albert. They were told, "He's fine, come back tomorrow." They were turned away, unaware that at that very moment, their friend, fellow activist and comrade Albert Omondi Ojwang was being driven to his death in the dark, silent shadows of Karura Forest. In the heart of Karura Forest, where the city's noise fades and the trees hold secrets whispered only to the wind, Albert Omondi Ojwang faced the last minutes of his life, not as a criminal, but as a man caught in the jaws of a system that wanted silence more than truth. They dragged him deep into the forest, away from the city lights, away from witnesses, into a world where uniforms turned into masks of brutality. There were no cameras, no rights readout, no courts, only fists, boots, sharp objects, and a single question echoed again and again. But Albert said nothing. All the while, a senior police officer stood nearby, shielded by rank and darkness, accompanied only by his driver, watching, directing, smiling bitterly at Albert's silence. "Speak, or you die," he told him. Then he left. But Albert's silence was not surrender. It was defiance. The beatings continued. And when pain failed, they resorted to suffocation. One officer came from behind and wrapped his hands around Albert's neck. "Unaongea wonke?" He tightened his grip. Albert was handcuffed. He could not fight, only signal. He tapped the ground with his foot. A desperate rhythm. Maybe a sign to say, "I'll talk," or maybe just, "I'm still alive." But the officer didn't stop. He kept pressing. The tapping slowed, slower. Then it stopped. Albert's body fell limp. Not broken by truth, but crushed by force. Panic set in. "Haikua tumue," they argued, accused each other. But Albert was no longer tapping, no longer breathing with the strength he had. Only the faintest pulse remained. Afraid of the consequences, they rushed him back to Central Police Station. But when they arrived, officers on duty saw the state he was in and refused to book him. He was dying. They knew it. Everyone knew it. But a call came from above. Samson Talam, the officer commanding station at Nairobi Central, was told what to do. The booking was ordered, not based on law, but on hierarchy. Albert was officially entered into the occurrence book. A lie inked into an official record. They cleared other inmates from a lonely cell and threw his lifeless body there like a discarded secret. He died hours later, not from his so-called crimes, but from the blows, the strangulation, and the silence he had refused to break. To cover it up, they took him to Mbagathi Hospital. Doctors pronounced him dead. But Albert had already been murdered long before the hospital sheets were pulled over him. This wasn't just brutality. This wasn't a mistake. This was a state-sanctioned killing disguised as interrogation. The truth. Albert died because Deputy Inspector General Eliud Langat filed a personal complaint. He believed fake headlines had tarnished his name, and rather than wait for truth or follow due process, he took charge of the case himself. That decision may have sealed Albert's fate. Because when powerful men pursue their own justice, the law becomes irrelevant. Now we ask, who gave the order to book a dying man at 1:39 a.m.? Who told Constable James Mokwana to squeeze the life out of another man under the illusion of questioning? Who was Mokwana working for when he ignored the panic of his fellow officers and continued to strangle a man who could barely breathe? Albert's final moments were not just the story of a man who was beaten and killed. They are the story of a system that fears exposure more than evil, that punishes defiance, that rewards silence, that cloaks murder with uniforms and paperwork. And somewhere, between Karura Forest and the corridors of power, someone knows the truth. We are not just mourning a man. We are demanding answers. And we are not going anywhere. The technician confessed. He was paid 3,000 shillings to tamper with the CCTV cameras. Just 3,000. That's all it took to erase hours of footage, to blur a nation's truth, to wipe away the only witnesses with eyes that do not lie. He was arrested on June 13th, 2025. Now pause and think. If this was all about Deputy Inspector General Eliud Langat trying to protect his name, would he go to these lengths? Would he orchestrate a series of covert operations? Send men into the forest, leave behind a trail of torture, murder, tampered footage, falsified OB entries, all for one man? No. This is deeper. The Kenyan police know how to make people disappear. They don't do it in the open. They don't leave bodies that scream. They operate in the dark, abduct, eliminate, erase. But this time, something went wrong. Albert didn't vanish quietly. His death is now speaking, louder than any living witness. So let's ask the real question. Who paid the technician to kill the truth? The truth is more disturbing than one name. There is a system here, a chain of command, hidden hands. And if we do not ask deeper, we will be fed a scapegoat, and the real architects will remain in power, untouched. James Mokwana, the officer accused of tightening the fatal grip around Albert's neck, had his own mission. Not a command from the top, but a side agenda, a freelance execution within an official operation. According to a whistleblower who spoke to the Star, Mokwana remained in the cell even after the others had stepped away, and that's where he likely finished what he started in Karura. The autopsy confirms what the silence tried to bury. Multiple soft tissue injuries, yes, but also a skull fracture consistent with blunt force trauma. A blow to the head, a collision with a wall, a final brutal act to seal the silence. So now we ask, who was Mokwana working for? Who gave the order to book a dying man? Who was that senior officer at Karura Forest giving quiet instructions from the safety of his car, then vanishing into the night? Who paid to blind the CCTV cameras? Who designed this script and handed out roles? Who signed Albert's death warrant? Because this did not happen in a vacuum. It happened during a critical moment in Kenya's political landscape, when the country was on edge over the finance bill, when citizens were rising, when protest was becoming a national language. Albert Oywang was not just a name, he was a symbol, a cautionary tale. A man whose death could terrify the daring, silence the truth seekers, and remind the nation what happens when you cross the wrong line. So here is my final appeal. Put aside your party, put aside your tribe, put aside your loyalty to names and colors, and answer me in the comments below, who killed Albert Ojwang? And more importantly, who are we if we let them get away with it?